For nearly 7 centuries, Carthage was one of the most powerful places on Earth. Picture a city so alive it hums, markets overflowing, ships sliding in and out of the harbour like clockwork, children chasing each other across whitewashed courtyards, merchants arguing prices in a dozen languages. Then one spring morning in 146 BC, Rome decided it was time for it to disappear forever. Not slowly, not peacefully. Gone in smoke and fire and the sound of walls collapsing. I used AI to take you back to those final days, to walk those streets one last time before they vanished. So sit back, turn the volume up and let history pull you in. To understand why the destruction of Carthage shocked the ancient world, you first have to understand what was actually being destroyed. This was not a small town. Carthage sat on a promontory on the North African coast near what is today Tunis in Tunisia, and it was positioned like a chess master would position a queen, controlling the narrow sea corridor between Sicily and Africa, watching every ship that passed through the central Mediterranean. The city was built around its harbours, and those harbours were extraordinary. 2 artificial ports, one for commerce and one for the navy, were connected to each other and sealed from the sea by an entrance that could be closed with an iron chain. The military harbour alone had capacity for roughly 160 to 170 warships, each tucked into its own shed, with storage beneath and a command tower rising from a central island. This was not a dock. It was a machine for running an empire at sea. Move away from the water and climb up toward the Byrsa, the great hill that dominated the city, and you will find something just as impressive. Streets laid out in grids, drainage systems running beneath them, and multi-storey houses opening onto interior courtyards that kept the air moving. Workshops for wool and metal and pottery packed tightly enough to move goods down to the docks without wasting a step. A market and civic square where politics and trade blurred into each other. Temples are visible from almost anywhere, including a great sanctuary to Eshmun, the healing god, near the top of the citadel. Carthage was not just wealthy, it was organised. It had elected officials, a functioning council, and a system for running a state that had lasted for centuries. And then, within the span of 3 brutal years, it was taken apart piece by piece. Before you can understand the final days, you need to understand the legal cage that had been built around Carthage long before the soldiers arrived. After losing the Second Punic War in 201 BC, Carthage had been forced to accept terms that essentially meant it could not go to war without Rome's permission. That restriction sat over the city for decades while Rome's North African ally, the Numidian king Massinissa, repeatedly raided and seized Carthaginian territory, and Rome consistently refused to let Carthage fight back. It was a slow strangulation dressed up as diplomacy. When Carthage finally broke the terms and raised an army to defend itself, Rome treated it as the justification it had been waiting for. In 149 BC, Roman forces landed at Utica, just down the coast, and Carthage did the only thing it thought might work. It tried to appease them again. The city handed over enormous quantities of weapons, hundreds of thousands of sets of armour, and thousands of catapults by ancient accounts, as well as its entire warship fleet, which was burned in the harbour at Utica while the Carthaginians watched. And only after all of that, only after Carthage was completely defenceless, did Rome announce the real demand. Leave the city, move 16 kilometres inland, Carthage itself will be demolished. That was not a peace offer, that was a sentence. And from that moment on, survival became the only plan left. What followed were 3 years of warfare that ancient writers struggle to fully describe because Carthage should not have lasted that long. In 149 BC, the Romans tried to take the city quickly and failed. Assault attempts from both sea and land were thrown back. A breach was opened in the walls and then lost. Roman camps struggled with disease and supply problems, and all the while Carthage was doing something remarkable. It was rebuilding its capacity to fight from scratch. Streets became workshops, civilians became soldiers. The city that had handed over all its weapons less than a year before was now manufacturing new ones around the clock. In 148 BC, Roman commanders changed, and the siege loosened into something closer to a standoff. Inside Carthage, a commander named Hasdrubal took full control, and to ensure his people would fight to the death rather than surrender, he executed Roman prisoners in view of the Roman army. It was brutal and calculated because once your enemies know you have done that, you cannot negotiate your way out. Hasdrubal had been chosen by everyone. Carthage would fight to the end. Quick pause. If you're enjoying this AI reconstruction, hit the like button right now. It massively helps the algorithm to push the video to more history fans. And if you want more realistic historical recreations like this, subscribe and join the community. We've got much bigger projects coming. Then in 147 BC, everything shifted again because Rome sent a new commander. His name was Scipio Aemilianus, and he had already distinguished himself during the early chaos of the siege when he was only a junior officer. Now, with the city still unbroken after 2 years, Rome set aside its own age rules to give him the consulship and the command. Scipio's approach was simple and merciless. Stop trying to take the city by force and instead cut off everything that kept it alive. He tightened the blockade, began building a massive stone mole to close off the harbour from the sea, and set about turning Carthage from a besieged city into a sealed tomb. Carthage responded with one of the most astonishing engineering moves of the entire war. While Scipio was closing the harbour entrance, the defenders secretly cut a new channel from the military port directly to the open sea. They built an entirely new fleet, reportedly 50 triremes and smaller vessels produced while under siege. For a brief moment it worked. The Roman navy was caught completely off guard. But then the withdrawal was mismanaged, the new channel became blocked at the wrong moment, and Roman ships were able to sink or capture most of the fleet while it was pinned against the walls. Every time Carthage opened a door, Rome built a wall in front of it. By the spring of 146 BC, the city had been under siege for nearly 3 years. Food was running out, water came only from cisterns, carefully rationed. People who had spent their whole lives as weavers and shopkeepers and dock workers were now soldiers by necessity. Holding walls with weapons their neighbours had hammered together from melted household metal. And then the final assault came, not over the walls, but through the harbour. Roman forces broke into the military port and pushed into the city's main square, camping there overnight before pushing further in the morning. And what followed was not a battle, it was a systematic destruction. Roman soldiers moved through residential neighbourhoods, house by house, killing everyone they encountered and setting fires behind them as they advanced, sometimes moving across rooftops to avoid the debris and missiles thrown down from above. Appian, the ancient historian, describes 6 days and nights of this fighting, with soldiers being rotated through shifts, while Scipio himself barely slept, working until exhaustion finally forced him to stop. The city that had been built over centuries was being unmade in less than a week. On what Appian calls the 7th day, something changed. Suppliants appeared at the temple of Aesculapius carrying sacred garlands and asked Scipio to spare the lives of those who would surrender. He agreed, with one exception. Roman deserters who had fought for Carthage would receive no mercy. By ancient accounts, 50,000 men and women came out through a narrow gate and were taken as prisoners of war. It is the most consistent survivor figure across ancient sources, and it is the number that stays with you, because what it means is that out of a city that had held hundreds of thousands of people, this is what remained. The last stand was at the temple complex on top of Byrsa, reached in peacetime by a 60-step ascent. Hasdrubal was there with his wife, his 2 sons, and around 900 Roman deserters who had nowhere left to go. When resistance finally collapsed, Hasdrubal surrendered to Scipio and was promised his life. But his wife refused that ending. According to Appian, she stood before Scipio, denounced her husband for choosing to live, killed their children herself, threw them into the burning temple, and then followed them into the fire. The last defenders burned with the building that had sheltered them, and it was over. After the smoke cleared, Rome did not simply occupy Carthage, it eliminated it. A senatorial commission was sent to oversee further demolition. The territory was reorganised as a Roman province, with Utica serving as the new capital. The site of Carthage itself was left as a deliberate ruin, a statement rather than a foundation. One popular story claims Rome salted the earth to prevent anything from ever growing there again, but modern scholarship is clear. That detail does not appear in ancient sources. It was added later and it's not accurate. What actually happened was brutal enough without the myth. The city was destroyed, its people were killed or enslaved, and the name Carthage was turned into a warning for the rest of the ancient world. One more detail survives, and it comes from Polybius, who knew Scipio personally. Standing amid the destruction he had ordered, Scipio reportedly wept. He quoted Homer, saying that a day will come when sacred Troy will perish, and when asked what he meant, he admitted he feared the same fate for his own country. Whether that moment is exact history or shaped memory, it captures something that still feels true. Even the people who destroy the great things understand somewhere that nothing lasts forever. The harbour curve is still there, the hilltop of Byrsa is still there, the outline of the ports can still be traced. The city that was meant to vanish never entirely did, and that is the story of Carthage's final days. A city that lasted centuries, dismantled in a week, and remembered for 2,000 years more. If you made it this far, thank you genuinely, because this is the kind of history that deserves to be felt, not just read in a textbook. If this video brought something to life for you, a subscription means a lot, and it helps me keep making these reconstructions. Now I want to hear from you. Which lost city or civilization should I reconstruct next using AI? Drop your suggestion in the comments below. Rome at the height of the empire, ancient Alexandria before the fires. Tell me what you want to see and I will take you there.